Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I am back with a kind of different painting. I haven't painted the red umbrellas in a long time, so I was running out of ideas and I thought I'd bring them back today. So this painting is also kind of like a moody spring painting from an aerial view. So what I'm doing right now is I've kind of painted the landscape from looking down from above, and I'm just kind of drawing all the lines to fill it in. So I wanted the sidewalk tiles to kind of resemble a little bit like parquet, but in concrete slabs. So I have to use a ruler and kind of draw all these lines here, some of them in diagonal and some of them in vertical. And over here, this round thing here will be where the cherry blossom tree will be blooming from. And then after that, I just add two more umbrellas. They will both be in red, one on this panel and another on this panel. And then I'm ready to start my first layer of paint. So the first thing I want to do is to kind of just map out the colors, and I'm going to paint the road first. Because the sidewalk tiles are going to be grey, I didn't want it to be like a grey overkill. So I'm painting this part of the road as kind of like a greenish grey. I'm mixing Paints Grey and Mighty's Green. So this will have this kind of like a moody green kind of look, which is exactly what I'm going for because this is kind of be like a moody spring day. So top part of the road is going to be Paints Grey and Mighty's Green, and then I'm going to add a little bit of pale grey coming towards the lines. So then I'm going to paint this line here and Cold's Grey, and then I'm going to just kind of lightly paint the umbrella in red just to mark it out. Everything looks a bit messy right now and rough, but as you know, I like to go layer by layer so I get a glimpse of how it would potentially look, and then if there's any room for changes or I'm okay with it, then I'll just repaint it over later. Next, I'm going to paint the stripe here and Paints Grey, and then the stripe below and Mars Black, followed by Titanium White. Okay, so for this part, because I've got all these pencil markings, which I have to kind of paint the tiles, each tiles individually in different colors. So what I'm going to do now is just I'm going to paint this in a very thin layer of grey, just to kind of like start the background, because later it'll be easier to paint over it. And then Van Dyck Brown for this patch of land here, and deep grey plus Van Dyck Brown for the railing around it. Once that is done, I'm going to start the second layer and I'm going to apply a thicker amount of paint. So as mentioned earlier, this part I'm going to paint it with Paints Grey mixed with Mighty's Green, so you get this kind of dark green. And then when I add a little bit of pale grey later, then you're going to achieve this kind of teal green look. Because this part of the road is kind of just like one flat surface and kind of like one color, I want to paint it as smooth as possible, so I'm just using the flat white brush and then going back and forth from left to right to blend out the paint evenly. And then I'm going to add a dash of pale grey in the middle part, and I'm just going to move the brush left and right as well to get a kind of like watery look, because this is supposed to be a rainy day. So I hardly use masking tapes, but it's so much more easier, especially when you're like trying to paint one straight line. So over here I'm going to paint this in coal grey, and then this line here I'm going to paint it in Paints Grey, and the one below it back in Mars Black, and the one below the black in Titanium White. I didn't use a masking tape for this one because the lines were a little bit thin, so I just decided to kind of use a fine brush and then I just paint over it. So once this three lines are done, I start to paint the tiles. What I'm going to do now is I'm just adding another layer of paint, but translucent enough so that I can still see my pencil markings. But I'm just going to cover up the space, and then I'm going to take a fine tip brush and then I'm going to outline each tile in Mars Black, and I'm going to individually paint each of it inside. So this second layer is not the final form of its tiles, but I just want to fill in the space so that it'll be easier for me to paint over it again with a little bit more different colors or variety to make the tiles stand out. But for now, I'm just filling them in with Paints Grey and a little bit of coal grey, because I'm trying to see how it looks like with the tiles painted on, and then I can adjust it on later. This part was actually quite tedious, and I didn't use a ruler and I have very shaky hands, so I had to slow down and try to draw a straight line, and then kind of just fill up all this painting before I move on to the next step. It's also very repetitive, so I've decided to just kind of fast forward through. Then I'm going to paint the red umbrella. So for the structure of these umbrellas, where the wire is, I'm going to paint them in Prussian blue mixed with purple red. And between each of these lines, I'm going to start with purple red, and then in the middle I'm going to use rose red. So you can see like each of these sections, it will be from dark to light. I usually like to use scarlet, but I've decided to go with rose red, so it has this more reddish pink tint that will match the cherry blossom later, because I think the pink and red will look a little bit too stark, so I've decided to choose this shade instead. So this is just the second layer, and we'll paint over it again later. So I'm going to paint around the soil in deep grey with just a bit of Van Dyck brown, and for the soil here I'm going to paint it in Van Dyck brown with just a little bit of Mars black. Okay, once this is done, we're on to the third and final layer. So I'm painting over this part of the road again with dark grey mixed with dark green, and then in the middle part here I'm going to add more pale grey to the Mighty's green and Payne's grey mix. Then I'm going to use the flat white brush, and I'm going to blend it so it looks a little bit smoother. So because I wanted this to look like a wet road after the rain, I'm trying to add a bit more titanium white here just to make it look a little bit glossy, and I'm using my fingers to smudge the paint. I don't know what it is about finger smudging, but somehow it just looks best when you're trying to get the wet road or wet tile effect. So I'm just using my fingers and I'm just smudging it, and then I use a paintbrush to soften the sides by blending it. Next, we're going to work on this pavement border along the sides here, because now it looks just like very flat. So I want to add a bit of character to it, give it a little bit wear and tear over time. I'm using a fine tip brush and Mars black, and I'm going to kind of like cut it, like separate it into sections, and then at the tip of it I add a little bit of cracks, or just kind of make it look a little bit uneven. And then I use a paintbrush, and then I mix it with deep grey and just a bit of black, and I kind of like smudge it so it has that kind of like worn out and weathered look. So this is an up close shot, and then I'm just going to repeat the same step for the rest of the other sections. And the part where you kind of paint the cracks in, like the uneven edges, doesn't have to be the same. Toss it up and give it a little bit of variety, and then we can move on to the next step. So this part is actually the easiest, but also the most tedious. In fact, this whole painting is actually very easy, but it took such a long time because of all these tiles. So I'm painting over the tiles again, but this time I'm adding more variety to the colors because I wanted to give it this kind of like a mosaic effect. I'm using 3 different shades of grey here: pale grey, cold grey and Payne's grey, and then I continue to outline each tile in Mars black. I've been on a little bit of a grey binge recently, so I've been using a lot of grey for my artworks. And for this, we just kind of like mix and match all the 3 greys, so you have some that are lighter and some tiles that are a bit darker, and then you'll get this kind of like nice mosaic effect. So this part is super simple and very repetitive, so I'm just going to kind of fast forward it a little bit in this video, but you get the idea. Color each tile individually in different shades of grey, and then outline it all in black. So for this patch of soil, the border around it, I'm going to add a little bit of bricks. It's quite simple, so I'm just using Mars black, and then I just kind of like divide it into sections just to give it a little bit of design. And then now we're gonna go and paint over the umbrellas. This part was also super easy, but because the second layer wasn't opaque enough, so I just needed to touch it up and paint over it. Just for a refresher, I'm using purple red, and then in the middle I use rose red, and then I just kind of blend it together. Once you finish painting the umbrella, we are finally on to the final part, which is the cherry on top of the painting, a pink blossom tree. Because the rest of the painting is already finished, so I find that the easiest way to sketch on top of a finished painting is by using a chalk. It's very easy to use. You can mark your things out easily, and then you can wipe it off easily. So this is how I want my tree to look like, because it's kind of like from an aerial view. Not too many branches, but just kind of like spread out over the umbrella on one end and over the other side. And then I'm going to paint across this outline using Mars Black and Van Dyck Brown. Once the paint has dried, I use a wet wipe and I just wipe the chalk away. But make sure that the paint has dried first, or else it will smudge very easily. And then now I'm just adding a little bit of branches because I want to create the structure for my cherry blossom. And then now what I'm using is a palette knife, because I wanted to add a bit of texture to the tree, just to let it stand out a little bit more, because this is just a very simple painting. So I use a medium, which was impasto medium, and then I mix it with portrait tone and baby pink. That's how I get that shade of peach kind of color. And then I use the tip of the palette knife and I just dot it to create the leaves or the flowers of the cherry blossom. And then I add a little bit of titanium white in between these pink flowers to just give it a little bit of variety. So this part is actually pretty straightforward. I think the only part where I find that it's a bit tricky is trying to figure out how much is too much and how little is too little. So what I've noticed, like from the left side, it looks a bit too scarce, but I was building up confidence by adding more petals and more flowers from the right side, when I find that like when it looks bushier and thicker, it looks nicer. So then I continue to add more petals and just make the whole cherry blossom a little bit more voluminous. And then I continue to add here and just create and figure out the shape along the way. So continue to just add these flowers and the white in between until you're satisfied with the shape of it or how bushy it looks, and then it is finished. So this painting is finally done. I haven't painted like this in a long time, so I'm not very sure if I actually like it or I don't like it, but I do like the color. It looks a bit moody, but it looks a little bit spring, just like a moody spring, which was what I was going for. Do I like it enough to sell it? Unfortunately, no. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video. Goodbye.